Get off my land right now! Cordelia Hargrove's shriek tore through the afternoon air like nails on metal. I looked up from my GPS survey equipment to find her striding toward me, designer heels sinking into the soft earth with every furious step. Her clipboard was clutched in one manicured hand, the other jabbing a finger in my direction. Behind her, a black SUV idled on the access road, door flung wide, as if she'd leapt out mid-drive. 11 years in Army EOD had taught me to stay calm under pressure. I calmly pulled out my phone and hit record. Drop a comment where you're watching from. I'm Holden Merrick, 39 years old. I spent over a decade disarming improvised explosives in places where one wrong move meant you didn't go home. These days I work as a geological surveyor, assessing land stability and water sources for sustainable development projects. 3 weeks ago, I bought 2 acres of wooded property adjacent to a natural lake. The land had been sitting empty for years, overgrown with brush and forgotten. I saw potential, peace, a place to finally breathe. The county records were clear. My property line ended 15 meters before the nearest house in what this woman apparently considered her domain. No easements, no covenants, no homeowners association restrictions. I'd checked everything twice before signing. That's what surveyors do. We measure, we verify, we don't guess. But Cordelia Hargrove didn't care about facts. She stopped 3 feet from me, close enough that I could smell her perfume. Chanel No. 5, applied with a heavy hand. The scent mixed with fresh-cut grass and lake water, creating something cloying and unpleasant. Her face was flushed, whether from exertion or anger I couldn't tell, probably both. She thrust the clipboard toward me like it was a court summons. "You're on Lakeside Estates Homeowners Association property," she said, her voice tight and controlled now, as if she'd remembered she had an audience. "Everything within 50 meters of the lake falls under our jurisdiction." The GPS unit in my hand continued recording coordinates while my phone captured every word she spoke. "I've reviewed the county records," I said evenly. "My property is outside any HOA boundaries. There's no covenant on this land." Her jaw tightened. She pulled a sheet from her clipboard and held it up. The paper was crisp, professionally printed on HOA letterhead. "Lakeside Estates Homeowners Association," it read in elegant script, with a logo featuring a swan on water. Below that, in bold letters, "Violation Notice." "This is your official notification," Cordelia continued. "Any construction, grading, or improvement on land adjacent to protected lake views requires HOA approval. You'll need to submit a formal application, provide architectural plans, and pay the review fee, $5,000. $5,000. For land I already owned. For permission I didn't legally need. I saved the GPS coordinates and slipped the unit into my pocket. Then I held up my phone, making sure she could see the recording light. "I'd like to document this conversation clearly," I said. "For the record." She blinked. Her confident expression flickered. "You can't record me without my permission." I replied calmly, "North Carolina is a one-party consent state. I only need my own consent to record a conversation I'm part of. You're standing on my private property making legal threats. I have every right to document this." The flush in her cheeks deepened from pink to crimson. Her free hand clenched into a fist at her side. For a moment, I thought she might actually try to grab my phone, but she was smart enough not to. Instead, she took a half step back and raised her clipboard like a shield. "You're making a serious mistake," she said, her voice dropping to something that tried to sound ominous. "The HOA has lawyers. We protect property values in this area. If you think you can just ignore our authority and do whatever you want, you'll find yourself facing legal action. We have procedures, rules, and we enforce them." I watched her carefully. Behind Cordelia, through the trees, I could see the roofline of her house. Large, expensive, custom-built with floor-to-ceiling windows facing the lake. Her backyard sloped down toward the water, manicured grass giving way to a dock with 2 jet skis. The afternoon sun was sinking lower, casting long shadows across the clearing. "What's your name?" I asked. The question seemed to catch her off guard. "Cordelia Hargrove. I'm the president of the Lakeside Estates HOA. I've held this position for 7 years. I pressed a bit further. "And how many homes are in your HOA, Mrs. Hargrove?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "That's not relevant." I kept my tone neutral. "It's relevant to me. I'd like to know the scope of the organization making demands on my property." She shifted her weight, heels sinking deeper into the soft ground. 4 homes. But we maintain high standards, quality over quantity. Every resident understands the importance of preserving the character and value of this area. 4 homes, not a large development, not a sprawling neighborhood with actual legal infrastructure, just 4 houses, probably friends or family, operating under a name that sounded official but had no real authority. I made a mental note to check the North Carolina Secretary of State registry when I got back to my truck. "I appreciate you introducing yourself," I said. "But as I mentioned, my property isn't part of any HOA. I won't be submitting an application or paying any fees. I plan to build here, and I'll follow all county regulations and obtain the proper permits, but I don't need your permission." Cordelia's nostrils flared. She took another step back, then seemed to reconsider and held her ground. Gnats danced in the golden light. Somewhere across the lake, a loon called out, its wavering cry echoing off the water. "You'll regret this," she said quietly. "People who don't cooperate with us find life difficult here. Very difficult." It was a threat, thinly veiled but unmistakable. I made sure my phone was angled to capture her face clearly. "Are you threatening me, Mrs. Hargrove?" I asked. She straightened her spine. "I'm informing you of reality. This is a tight-knit community. We look out for each other. We don't appreciate outsiders who refuse to respect our way of doing things." She spun on her heel, nearly losing her balance as the narrow point sank into the earth. For a second she wobbled, arms windmilling slightly, before she caught herself and marched back toward her SUV. The door slammed hard enough to rock the vehicle on its suspension. Gravel sprayed as she accelerated away, leaving twin ruts in the access road. I stood there in the fading light, listening to the sound of her engine fade into the distance. I uploaded the recording to secure cloud storage and filed the GPS data. In the truck, I jotted down every key detail: time, words, faces, vehicle. Habit made it automatic, a ritual that kept things clean when conflict came. The sun touched the horizon, painting the lake in shades of amber and gold. It should have been peaceful. Instead, I felt the familiar weight of an impending conflict settling over me. Not the kind with bullets and explosives. This would be different, quieter, but no less real. Cordelia Hargrove thought she could intimidate me with a clipboard and fake authority. What she didn't understand yet was simple. I'd faced worse, much worse, and I knew exactly how to handle this. Document everything, follow procedure, let the system work. She wanted a fight. She'd get one, just not the kind she expected. The notices appeared overnight like a coordinated attack. I arrived at the property the next morning to find 3 sheets of paper plastered across my gate, stapled to trees, even taped to the survey stakes I'd placed the day before. Each one screamed in bold red letters: violation notice, cease and desist order, HOA legal action pending. The logos looked professional, official seals, case numbers, everything designed to look like legitimate legal documents from an actual authority. I photographed each notice before removing them. Close-ups of the text, wide shots showing their placement. I checked the metadata on each photo to ensure the GPS coordinates and timestamps were captured. Then I peeled them off carefully, preserving them flat in a document folder. The paper quality was good. Laser printed, the kind of thing you'd get from a business supply store, not a county office. Back in my truck, I spread the notices across the passenger seat and examined them more closely. The first claimed I was conducting unauthorized construction and demanded immediate cessation of all activity. The second threatened legal action for violating subdivision covenants. The third listed fines that would accrue daily, starting at $500 and escalating to $2,000 within a week. At the bottom of each document, stamped in what was meant to look like an official seal, Lakeside HOA Enforcement Division, for 4 houses. I pulled out my laptop and connected to my mobile hotspot. The North Carolina Secretary of State website loaded quickly. I navigated to the business entity search and typed in the Lakeside Estates Homeowners Association. The results came back empty. I tried variations. Lakeside HOA, Lakeside Estates Association, nothing. No registered nonprofit, no corporation, no legal entity of any kind. Whatever authority Cordelia Hargrove claimed to represent existed only in her imagination and on professionally printed letterhead. Next, I accessed the county clerk's database. My property deed was there, clean and clear. I pulled up the subdivision plat for the area surrounding the lake. The 4 houses Cordelia had mentioned were clustered together, part of a small development from the early 2000s. The plat showed deed restrictions and covenants, but they applied only to those 4 parcels. My land wasn't part of the subdivision. It had been surveyed and recorded separately, decades earlier. The boundary line was unambiguous. I saved the screenshots alongside yesterday's files, adding them to the same evidence folder before calling the county clerk's office. A woman named Patricia answered, her voice warm and efficient. I explained the situation, gave her my parcel number, and asked her to verify what I was seeing online. She put me on hold for 3 minutes. When she came back, her tone had shifted slightly, more careful. Mr. Merrick, your property is definitely not part of the Lakeside Estates subdivision. There are no covenants, restrictions, or HOA provisions attached to your deed. You're free and clear. And if someone were to claim otherwise? I asked. If they were issuing violation notices and demanding fees? She paused. That would be concerning. If you're receiving documents that misrepresent legal authority, you might want to consult an attorney or file a report with the sheriff's office. I thanked her and ended the call. Then I created a new folder on my laptop labeled Legal Defense and began organizing everything systematically. Photos, audio recordings, database screenshots, official correspondence. Every piece of evidence is documented and cataloged. The afternoon was warm, humidity rising off the lake in visible waves. I was clearing brush near the eastern property line when I heard the sound of tires on gravel. I looked up to see Cordelia's black SUV pulling onto the access road, followed by a white pickup truck. Both vehicles stopped near my gate. Cordelia emerged first, dressed in pressed khakis and a polo shirt. The man who climbed out of the truck was younger, maybe late 20s, wearing a matching polo with HOA security embroidered across the chest. I reached up and activated the body camera clipped to my shirt collar. The device was small, designed for law enforcement use, with a wide-angle lens and 8 hours of battery life. I'd started wearing it this morning, a precaution that now seemed prescient. The red recording light blinked once, then went solid. Everything that happened next would be captured in high definition. Cordelia approached with the security guard trailing behind her. She carried the same clipboard, but her expression was different today, more controlled, rehearsed, like she'd prepared for this encounter. Mr. Merrick, she said, stopping at what she probably thought was a respectful distance. I see you received our notices. I'm here to discuss compliance. I set down the brush trimmer and wiped my hands on my jeans. I received documents with false claims. There's a difference. The security guard shifted his weight, trying to look imposing. He had the build of someone who spent time in a gym, but his stance was all wrong. No real training, just size and intimidation. Ma'am, you want me to escort him off the property? He asked. Cordelia held up a hand. Not yet. Let's give Mr. Merrick a chance to understand the situation. She turned back to me. You're conducting illegal grading work. We have photographic evidence of earth disturbance and vegetation removal within the protected zone. Protected by what authority? I asked. Your HOA has no legal jurisdiction over this land. I've verified that with the county clerk. Your organization isn't even registered with the state. Her smile didn't waver. We operate under established precedent and community agreement. Registration is a formality we're in the process of completing. I pulled my phone from my pocket, making the motion obvious and deliberate. I'm recording this conversation, same as yesterday, for documentation purposes. The security guard stepped forward. Sir, you need to put that phone away. You don't have permission to record us. I kept my voice level and clear. This is my private property. You're both here without invitation, making false legal claims. I have every right to document this interaction. If you're uncomfortable being recorded, you're free to leave. Cordelia's composure cracked slightly. Her jaw tightened, and she glanced at the security guard, then back at me. We're trying to resolve this amicably. But if you insist on being difficult, we'll have no choice but to pursue formal legal channels. I nodded slowly. Please do. I'd welcome the opportunity to present the actual legal facts to a judge. The security guard shifted again, looking uncertain now. He glanced at Cordelia as if waiting for instructions. She seemed to realize she was losing control of the situation. You're making this harder than it needs to be, she said, her voice rising slightly. This community has standards. We've worked hard to maintain property values and aesthetic quality. You can't just show up and do whatever you want without consideration for the people who were here first. I let that statement hang in the air for a moment. Mrs. Hargrove, I'm not doing anything for your community. I'm developing my own land, following all applicable laws and regulations. What you're doing, issuing false legal notices and threatening me with fake enforcement, that's actually illegal. It's harassment. Possibly extortion. Her face flushed red. The security guard took half a step back, suddenly looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. Cordelia's clipboard trembled slightly in her hands. How dare you accuse me of extortion? I'm protecting this neighborhood. You're the one who's... She paused, searching for words. Who's trespassing on our quality of life? I'm going to ask you both to leave now, I said. If you come back onto my property without permission, I'll contact the sheriff's office and file a formal complaint. The security guard didn't need to be told twice. He turned and walked back toward his truck, leaving Cordelia standing alone. She stared at me for another few seconds, her expression cycling through anger, disbelief, and something that might have been fear. Then she spun around and marched back to her SUV, movements stiff and jerky. When the engines faded, I reviewed the body cam footage, crisp, complete. I filed it with the rest and noted the details while they were still sharp in my mind. The security guard's lack of actual credentials, Cordelia's escalating threats, the explicit claim that their actions would continue. I pulled out my phone and searched for real estate attorneys in the area. The third result was a firm that specialized in property disputes and HOA conflicts. I bookmarked the page and sent an email requesting a consultation, attaching the key documents and a brief summary of the situation. Then I opened a new document and began drafting a timeline. Every interaction, every threat, every piece of evidence. The pattern was already clear. Cordelia wasn't going to stop. She'd keep escalating until either I gave in or she forced a confrontation she couldn't control. But I'd been trained to think several moves ahead, to anticipate, to prepare. She thought she was dealing with someone who'd be intimidated by official-looking paperwork and vague legal threats. What she didn't realize was that I'd already decided how this would end, not with anger, not with confrontation, with documentation, procedure, and the patient application of actual law. The sun was setting again, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. I packed up my tools and locked the gate behind me. Tomorrow I'd start the next phase, building the fence. I had to leave town for 3 days. A client in the western part of the state needed a comprehensive geological survey for a watershed restoration project. The timing wasn't ideal, but the work was already contracted. Before I left, I installed 2 additional security cameras on my property, hidden in weatherproof housings mounted to trees. They were motion-activated, solar-powered, and transmitted footage directly to cloud storage via cellular connection. I also reinforced the gate lock and posted clear no trespassing signs at 3 points along the accessible perimeter. Each sign included the specific statute numbers for criminal trespass in North Carolina. The survey work went smoothly. Long days hiking ridgelines and taking core samples, nights in a budget motel reviewing data. I checked the camera feeds twice daily through my phone. For the first 2 days, nothing. Just deer moving through the underbrush, a fox investigating the gate, wind moving branches. On the 3rd day, everything changed. I was eating lunch in my truck when the motion alert pinged. I opened the app and watched the footage load. The timestamp showed 11:37 a.m. A silver SUV I didn't recognize rolled up to the gate. 2 men in plain white t-shirts and jeans got out. No uniforms, no identification visible. They spent a moment examining the lock, then one of them produced a bolt cutter from the truck bed. The lock fell away in seconds. They drove onto my property and parked near the center of the cleared area. One man pulled out a bundle of orange survey stakes while the other retrieved a camera. They planted a stake directly in the middle of my land. I zoomed in on my phone screen. The stake had a label zip-tied to it, HOA boundary marker. The entire intrusion lasted 14 minutes. They took photographs of the stake from multiple angles, got back in their truck, and drove out. They didn't replace the gate lock, just left it hanging open. I immediately saved the footage to 3 separate cloud accounts, then called the sheriff's office. The dispatcher took my information and said a deputy would meet me at the property when I returned. I cut my trip short and drove back that evening. The gate was still open when I arrived, swinging slightly in the breeze. The orange stake stood exactly where the camera footage showed it. I photographed it from every angle, capturing the label, the GPS coordinates, the deliberate placement. I didn't touch anything. This stake was evidence. Moving it would only weaken my case. Deputy Walsh showed up 40 minutes later in a marked patrol vehicle. He was younger than I expected, maybe late 20s, with a methodical way of moving that suggested he took his job seriously. I showed him my identification, the property deed, and the camera footage on my phone. He watched it twice, taking notes in a small leather notebook. That's pretty clear-cut trespassing, he said. Do you know who these individuals are? I replied, no direct knowledge, but the vehicle's license plate is visible in the footage. I rewound to a frame where the plate was clear and held it up. He copied down the number. I'll run this when I get back to the station. You said you've had previous issues with the neighbor? I gave him a condensed version of the confrontations with Cordelia, the fake violation notices, the demands for payment. He kept writing, occasionally asking clarifying questions. His expression remained neutral, professional. When I finished, he walked over to the orange stake and examined it without touching it. HOA boundary marker, he read aloud. But this land isn't part of an HOA? I shook my head. Verified with the county clerk. There's no legal jurisdiction here. He made a final note and closed his notebook. I'm going to file a formal report. Criminal trespass, case number 2024-0847. You'll get a copy via email within 24 hours. I'll also follow up on that vehicle registration. He paused before getting in his patrol car. Mr. Merrick, keep doing what you're doing. Document everything. Don't engage directly if they come back. Just call us. After he left, I sent the camera footage to my lawyer via encrypted email with a detailed description of events. Then I made a phone call I'd been putting off. Cordelia answered on the third ring. Her voice was cautious. Yes? I activated the recording app before speaking. Mrs. Hargrove, this is Holden Merrick. I'm calling to inform you that 2 individuals trespassed on my property today, planted a fake survey marker, and damaged my gate lock. The sheriff's office has been notified. The incident was captured on security cameras. Silence on the other end. Then carefully, I don't know what you're talking about. The vehicle used in the trespass is registered to a real estate company connected to your husband. More silence. I could hear her breathing, quick and shallow. Those were legitimate surveyors conducting routine boundary verification, she finally said. I cut her off. They had no right. They destroyed my property, trespassed on private land, and planted false markers. That's criminal activity, Mrs. Hargrove, and it's documented. Her voice shifted, became harder. You're being paranoid. Nobody is targeting you. If you'd just cooperated from the beginning, none of this would be necessary. There it was, the admission that this was coordinated. Intentional. I kept my tone flat. I'm informing you that I'm moving forward with construction. Tomorrow I'll be installing a fence along the exact legal property line as established by a licensed surveyor. If you or anyone acting on your behalf interferes, I'll pursue criminal charges and civil action. She said sharply, You can't build a fence there. It'll go right through. She stopped abruptly. Through what, Mrs. Hargrove? I asked. The line went dead. I saved the recording and added it to the evidence folder. Then I opened the survey documents I'd commissioned 2 weeks earlier. A licensed surveyor had spent an entire day with GPS equipment and historical plat records, establishing the exact legal boundaries of my property. The resulting map was precise down to centimeters. I overlaid it with an aerial photo of the area. The property line ran straight and true, following the original survey from when the land was first parceled. And then, right at the point where my land bordered Cordelia's property, it cut directly through what she'd been using as her backyard. Approximately 2 meters of manicured lawn, part of her stone patio, and a corner of her garden shed. Land she'd been treating as her own for years. Land that legally belonged to the county as an easement, but which I now had the right to fence according to my property boundaries. She'd been squatting on land that wasn't hers. And tomorrow, when the fence went up, everyone would see it. I made calls to 3 construction companies before finding one that could start immediately. The contractor quoted me a fair price for a cedar fence, 6 feet high, running the length of the disputed boundary. When can you start? I asked. Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., he replied. The weather's good, the ground's soft from last week's rain. We'll have it up in 2 days. I confirmed the job and transferred the deposit. Then I drove to the county offices and picked up my building permit. Everything was in order. Approved and stamped. That night, I spread the survey map across my dining table and studied it under bright light. The fence line would be impossible for Cordelia to ignore. It would be a physical manifestation of legal reality, cutting through her illusion of control. She'd pushed this confrontation, escalated at every turn, ignored every opportunity to back down. Now she'd see exactly where the real boundaries were, not where she wanted them to be, where they actually existed. The construction crew arrived at 6:55 a.m., 3 pickup trucks rolling up the access road in formation. The foreman was a lean man in his 50s with weathered hands and the efficient movements of someone who'd built 10,000 fences in his lifetime. He walked the property line with me, referencing the official survey map I'd printed on waterproof paper. "This is the boundary," I said, pointing to the marks the licensed surveyor had made 2 weeks earlier. "Straight through, exactly as shown." He nodded, studying the terrain, then looked toward Cordelia's house, visible through the trees. "That's going to cut into that yard pretty good." I met his eyes. "That's the legal property line. That's where the fence goes." His crew unloaded posts, rails, and cedar planks while he set up a string line to mark the exact path. They worked with the kind of rhythm that comes from years of experience, measuring twice, cutting once, every movement deliberate. I stood nearby with the survey map and my building permit, ready for the confrontation I knew was coming. Cordelia appeared at 7:43, charging across her lawn in white capri pants and a pale blue blouse. Her face was already red, hair pulled back tight. "Stop! You cannot build that fence there!" The crew paused, looking at their foreman. He glanced at me. I nodded once and he signaled for them to continue working. The rhythmic thunk of the post hole digger resumed. Cordelia's voice climbed higher. "That fence is going through my yard. This is my property." I held up the survey map. "Mrs. Hargrove, this is the legal property line as established by a licensed surveyor and verified by county records." She snatched the map from my hands, crumpling it as she stared at the lines. "This is wrong. My property extends to that tree line. It always has." I pulled out a second copy from my folder. "Your property ends here. This section you've been using is actually a county easement. You've been occupying it without legal right." Her hands trembled. The crumpled map fell to the ground. "I've lived here for 15 years. This has been my yard for 15 years. I kept my voice level. "Adverse possession in North Carolina requires 20 years of continuous occupation. You're 5 years short, and even then you'd need to prove it in court." She stared at me, then her expression shifted from shock to rage. "You planned this. You're doing this to punish me." I replied evenly, "I'm building a fence on my property line, that's all." She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. "I'm calling the police. This is vandalism." I gestured toward the crew. "Please do. I have my building permit, my survey, and my property deed. Everything is legal and documented." She dialed anyway, voice high and strained as she spoke to the dispatcher. We waited. The crew kept working. Posts went into the ground every 8 feet, perfectly aligned. The foreman checked each one with a level before securing it. 20 minutes later, Sheriff Brennan's vehicle pulled up. He stepped out slowly, taking in the scene with careful assessment. "Mrs. Hargrove," he said, nodding to her. Then to me, "Mr. Merrick." Cordelia launched into her complaint immediately. "Sheriff, this man is building a fence through my yard. He's destroying property I've maintained for 15 years. I want him arrested." Brennan listened without interrupting, then turned to me. "Mr. Merrick, do you have documentation for this construction?" I handed him the folder. Building permit, survey map, property deed. He examined each document carefully, cross-referencing the survey with the physical landscape. He walked the string line, checked the corner markers, then pulled out his phone and opened what looked like a county GIS application. "Mrs. Hargrove, can you show me your property survey?" She blinked. "I don't have it with me, but I know where my property ends." "This is the county's official property boundary map," he said, holding up his phone. "It matches Mr. Merrick's survey exactly. The fence he's building is on the legal property line." Cordelia's face went from red to pale. "That can't be right. When I bought this house, the real estate agent showed me the boundaries." Brennan's expression didn't change. "Real estate agents don't establish legal boundaries, ma'am. Surveyors do. And according to every official record, Mr. Merrick's survey is correct." She was shaking now, visibly trembling. "But I've been using that land. I built my patio there, my garden shed." Brennan nodded. "That's between you and the county, ma'am, but Mr. Merrick has every right to fence his property line. He's not breaking any law." She turned to me, eyes wet. "This is because I tried to enforce HOA standards. You're doing this to get back at me." I met her gaze without malice. "I'm building a fence where my property line is. If you'd checked your own boundaries before assuming authority over mine, we wouldn't be here." Brennan cleared his throat. "Mrs. Hargrove, how long have you known Mr. Merrick's property wasn't part of your HOA?" Her mouth opened, closed. "It's adjacent to us. It should be," he pressed. "Should be or is, because I've reviewed the complaints you've filed." "You've claimed authority you don't have." She stepped back. "I was protecting property values." Brennan glanced at the body camera on my chest, then at me. You former military, Mr. Merrick? I nodded. Army, 11 years, EOD. Something shifted in his expression. Respect. Figured. You've been doing this by the book. Keep it that way. He turned back to Cordelia. Ma'am, I suggest you consult with a property attorney, but interfering with legal construction is a crime, do you understand? She didn't answer, just stood there, watching as the crew continued working. Her husband appeared at the edge of her yard, a tall man in golf clothes. Cordelia, come inside. She ignored him. I watched the fence rise, watched 2 meters of her carefully maintained lawn disappear behind cedar planks. When the first section was complete, she finally turned and walked away. Her husband followed, hand hovering near her shoulder but not quite touching. Brennan lingered a moment. She's going to escalate, he said quietly. I nodded. I know. I'm ready. He tipped his hat and left. The crew worked through lunch, through the afternoon heat. By 4 p.m., the fence was complete. 6 feet of solid cedar, running straight and true along the exact legal boundary. On my side, untouched land and lake access. On the other side, Cordelia's house, now visibly missing part of what she'd considered her yard. I mounted a sign on the gate. Private property. No trespassing. Behind me, through the wooden slats, I could see Cordelia standing at her back window, staring out at the fence that had just redefined her world. In the days that followed, Cordelia vanished from sight. The immaculate lawn she once guarded began to yellow, and neighbors whispered about lights burning in her house at all hours. Each ignored email, each unanswered call from the county chipped away at her composure until only quiet panic remained beneath the polish. The power went out at 11:17 p.m. I was reviewing survey data on my laptop in the temporary cabin I'd set up on the property when the screen went dark. Not a flicker, not a brownout, just instant darkness, the kind of abrupt cutoff that doesn't happen naturally. I sat still for a moment, letting my eyes adjust, then reached for the flashlight I kept within arm's reach. Old habits from working in places where darkness could hide threats. The cabin's electrical panel was mounted on the exterior wall, protected by a locked metal box. I walked around the perimeter with the flashlight, checking the ground as I moved. Fresh footprints in the soft earth near the panel. Size 7 women's shoes, the heel pattern distinct and clear. The panel box hung open, lock mechanism twisted and broken. Inside, the main breaker had been manually switched to the off position. I photographed everything before touching anything. The footprints from 3 angles with a ruler for scale. The damaged lock mechanism, the breaker position. Then I put on gloves and carefully flipped the breaker back on. The cabin lights blazed to life. I immediately went to my laptop and pulled up the security camera feeds. The motion-activated cameras had captured it all. The timestamp read 11:09 p.m. Cordelia appeared on screen, walking quickly across my property from the direction of her house. She wore dark clothing, completely different from her usual designer outfits. In her hand, a small crowbar. She approached the electrical panel, looked around once, then jammed the crowbar into the lock. It took her 3 tries to break it open. She pulled the panel door wide, stared at the breakers for a moment as if unsure which one to flip, then switched off the main. The camera's night vision mode captured her face clearly as she hurried away. 8 minutes later, a second figure appeared, the man who'd been wearing the HOA security polo during their previous visit. He carried a larger crowbar and walked with the false confidence of someone who thought he was being clever. He examined the already broken lock, then checked inside the panel as if confirming the power was off. He didn't flip anything back on, just nodded to himself and walked away in the same direction Cordelia had gone. I saved the footage to 3 cloud accounts, then called the sheriff's office. The night dispatcher took my report and said a deputy would be out within the hour. While I waited, I examined the electrical panel more carefully. The lock was cheap, easily replaceable, but the violation itself was serious. Tampering with someone's utilities wasn't just harassment. It was a crime with specific statutes and penalties. I downloaded the video clips to my phone and laptop, labeled them clearly with timestamps and descriptions. Then I sat on the cabin steps and waited. The night was quiet except for crickets and the occasional splash from the lake. Across the property line, Cordelia's house was dark except for a single upstairs window. I could see a silhouette moving behind the curtain. Deputy Walsh arrived 53 minutes later. He recognized me from the previous trespass report. "Mr. Merrick," he said, stepping out of his patrol vehicle. "Another incident?" I showed him the broken lock first, then the footprints, then the camera footage on my phone. He watched the video twice, his expression hardening. That's pretty clear. Criminal mischief at minimum. Possibly vandalism depending on the damage cost. He took photos of the footprints and the electrical panel, then wrote detailed notes in his report book. You recognize the individuals in the video? He asked. I nodded. The woman is Cordelia Hargrove. The man has been on my property before, claiming to be HOA security. Walsh made another note. This is the second report involving Mrs. Hargrove in less than a week. The pattern is concerning. He closed his notebook. I'm filing this as case number 2024-0863, vandalism and trespassing. The county utilities office will be notified about the tampering. That's taken seriously. After Walsh left, I called my attorney. It was late, but Donovan had told me to contact him anytime there was an incident. He answered on the fourth ring, voice alert despite the hour. I described what happened and sent him the video files. He was quiet for a moment after watching them. Holden, this is escalating exactly as we discussed. She's desperate now. Desperate people make mistakes, but they also become unpredictable. I think it's time to consider legal action. What kind of action? I asked. He laid out the options: restraining order, civil harassment suit, criminal complaints for the documented violations. Each option had pros and cons, timelines and costs. My recommendation, Donovan said, is we compile everything and present it to the district attorney. Let them decide if criminal charges are warranted. In the meantime, you keep documenting. Don't engage. Don't retaliate. Let her dig her own hole deeper. I agreed and ended the call. Then I composed an email to the sheriff's office with all the evidence compiled chronologically. Day 1 confrontation with audio, fake violation notices, trespass with video, tonight's vandalism with video, every incident documented, every piece of evidence time-stamped and verified. I copied my attorney and saved a draft, planning to send it in the morning when I could think more clearly. The next morning brought another escalation. I found an email in my inbox, sent from an address that was obviously fake. Lakeside HO illegal at Freemail. The subject line read, final notice before legal action. The message was 3 paragraphs of pseudo-legal language demanding I remove the fence within 48 hours or face a lawsuit for creating a nuisance, diminishing property values, and violating community standards. The threatened amount, $50,000 in damages. I forwarded it to Donovan without comment. He replied within 10 minutes. This is textbook extortion. She's using threats of legal action to coerce you into compliance. Save this. It's evidence. I saved it, added it to the folder. The pattern was undeniable now. Cordelia wasn't just harassing me, she was systematically violating multiple laws, each action documented and preserved. That afternoon, I found the final piece of evidence I needed. While checking the fence line, I noticed something strange near the gate. A document wedged under one of the fence posts, protected from the weather by a plastic sleeve. I photographed it in place before removing it. It was a photocopy of my building permit, but altered. Someone had used photo editing software to change the property boundary lines on the attached survey map. The modifications were clumsy, obvious to anyone who knew what to look for. At the bottom, stamped in what was meant to look official, county approved, revised. I drove straight to the county building department. The clerk who'd issued my original permit examined the forgery with widening eyes. This is not from our office, she said firmly. This is a fraudulent document. The seal is wrong, the format is wrong, and we would never stamp anything revised without a new permit number. She made a copy for their records and gave me a signed statement confirming the document was fake. Mr. Merrick, this is a serious crime. You need to report this to law enforcement. I already had my phone out calling the sheriff's office for the 3rd time in as many days. This time, I asked specifically for Sheriff Brennan. When he answered, I said simply, Sheriff, she just committed forgery. I have the evidence. I think it's time we had a conversation about pressing charges. Friday morning arrived with unseasonable heat, the kind that made the air shimmer above the pavement. I was working on drainage plans for the cabin foundation when I heard the vehicles approaching. Not one or two. Multiple engines, heavy and deliberate. I looked up to see 4 men in matching uniforms climbing out of 2 pickup trucks. The uniforms were elaborate, almost paramilitary. Black cargo pants, tactical boots, and shirts with patches reading Lakeside HOA Enforcement in bold letters across the back. I reached up and activated my body camera. The small red light blinked on. Then I pulled out my phone and started a second recording, holding it visibly in my hand. The 4 men walked toward me in formation, trying to project authority they didn't have. The one in front, older and heavier than the others, carried a clipboard. "Mr. Merrick," he called out, "we're authorized by the Lakeside Estates Homeowners Association to remove the illegally constructed fence on this property. You need to step aside and let us do our work." I stayed exactly where I was. "Do you have a court order?" I asked. The man blinked. "We have authorization from the HOA. I kept my voice level and clear. "I didn't ask about authorization. I asked if you have a court order from a judge directing the removal of my fence." He glanced at his clipboard as if the answer might be written there. "We have a removal order signed by the HOA president." I held up my phone, making sure the camera caught his face clearly. "That's not a court order. This is private property. You're trespassing. I'm documenting this." One of the younger men stepped forward, chest puffed out. "You can't stop us. We're here on official business." I didn't move. "Official business requires official authorization. You have none. If you touch that fence, I'll consider it felony vandalism and criminal trespass. I've already contacted the sheriff's office. They're on their way." That was a bluff. I hadn't called yet, but I would if needed. The man with the clipboard hesitated, uncertainty flickering across his face. Behind him, one of his crew walked to the truck bed and pulled out a large crowbar. "We're doing this whether you like it or not," the younger man said. "The HOA has rights. That fence is a violation." I took a breath, keeping my voice calm and steady. "You're about to commit a crime. I'm giving you 60 seconds to leave my property voluntarily. If you're still here after that, you'll be dealing with law enforcement." The man with the crowbar took a step toward the fence. I didn't flinch, didn't move, just kept the camera pointed at him and started counting aloud. 60, 59, 58. Movement caught my eye. Cordelia was walking down from her house, phone in hand, recording the scene. She was smiling, actually smiling like she was capturing a victory. She called out to the men, "Do what you're authorized to do. I'll handle any legal issues." That was the moment I knew I had her, on camera, directing criminal activity, acknowledging her role in organizing it. I continued counting. 43, 42, 41. Sirens split the morning air, 3 units racing up the access road, lights strobing across the trucks. Brennan stepped out first, calm and steady, 2 deputies fanning wide. The 4 men in black froze. "Who's in charge here?" Brennan asked. "I am," the older one said, clutching a clipboard. "We're HOA enforcement, here to remove an illegal fence." Brennan studied their uniforms, the tools, the trucks. "Do you have a demolition permit, a court order?" The man hesitated. "We have authorization from Mrs. Hargrove." "That's not the law," Brennan said, flipping through the papers. "This document is worthless. You're trespassing and about to damage private property, a felony under state statute." The man blanched. "She told us it was legitimate." Brennan turned toward the hill. "Mrs. Hargrove, down here, please." She came slowly, every step heavier than the last. "Did you hire these men?" he asked. "I authorized them to enforce HOA standards," she managed. Brennan's voice hardened. "You knew this fence sits on Mr. Merrick's legal boundary. You were present when I verified it." She said nothing, the color draining from her face. She opened her mouth, closed it. Her face cycled through expressions, landing on something between panic and defiance. "I was protecting my community. That's what HOA presidents do." Brennan shook his head. "Your HOA has no jurisdiction here. You've been told that repeatedly." He turned to the 4 men. "You have 60 seconds to leave this property. If any of you returns, you'll be arrested." They didn't need to be told twice. The truck started up and reversed down the access road, gravel spraying. When they were gone, Brennan turned his full attention to Cordelia. "Mrs. Hargrove, I need you to stay right here." He gestured to one of the deputies. "Deputy Walsh, get a statement from Mr. Merrick. Make sure we document everything." Walsh approached with his notebook. I played back the footage from my body camera and phone, showing the entire confrontation. Walsh watched carefully, making notes. Meanwhile, Brennan was talking to Cordelia in low tones. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught fragments. Harassment, pattern of behavior, criminal investigation. Her responses grew more agitated. She gestured toward me, her voice rising. "He's the one who caused all this. He built that fence just to spite me. He knew it would go through my yard." Brennan's reply was calm but firm. "That's his legal right, ma'am. What you've done is illegal." Cordelia's husband appeared, jogging down from their house. He looked panicked, out of breath. What's going on? Cordelia, what did you do? She turned on him. I did what you should have done. I stood up for our property. He stared at her like she was a stranger. By hiring people to commit vandalism? Are you insane? Brennan stepped between them. Sir, I'm going to need you to step back. The husband held up his hands and retreated several paces. Brennan pulled out handcuffs. The sound of metal clicking made everything suddenly, terribly real. Cordelia's eyes went wide. What are you doing? Brennan's voice was formal now, professional. Cordelia Hargrove, you're under arrest for obstruction of justice. She tried to pull away. You can't arrest me. I haven't done anything wrong. Brennan caught her wrist gently but firmly. Ma'am, you physically attempted to interfere with my investigation. That's obstruction. You have the right to remain silent. As he recited the Miranda warning, Cordelia began to cry. Not quietly, loud, gasping sobs that echoed across the property. Neighbors appeared in their yards, drawn by the commotion. 3 people I'd never met stood watching as Cordelia was placed in handcuffs and led toward the patrol car. Her husband stood frozen, hands at his sides, watching his wife fall apart. She was still shouting as Brennan guided her into the back seat. This is wrong. You're all wrong. That man is destroying everything. The door closed, muffling her voice. Brennan walked back to where I stood with Deputy Walsh. Mr. Merrick, we'll need you to come to the station and give a formal statement. Bring all your documentation, everything you've got. I nodded. I have it organized and ready. He looked at me for a long moment. You did everything right. Documented everything, stayed calm, didn't engage. That's why this is going to stick. He glanced toward the patrol car where Cordelia sat, face buried in her hands. She's going to face serious charges. You know that. I knew. I watched as the patrol car pulled away, carrying Cordelia toward consequences she'd built for herself, one illegal action at a time. The formal notification arrived 8 days later via certified mail. District Attorney's Office, County of Henderson, North Carolina. Inside, a detailed breakdown of charges filed against Cordelia Ann Hargrove. I sat at my kitchen table and read through the document twice, making sure I understood every word. 7 criminal counts. Each one carries specific penalties under state law. Count 1, criminal trespass, 1st degree, 2 separate incidents. Count 2, vandalism of public utilities, the electrical panel tampering. Count 3, forgery of public documents, the altered building permit. Class H felony, 4 to 25 months potential sentence. Count 4, impersonation of legal authority. Her fake HOA enforcement division. Count 5, extortion. The email threatened a $50,000 lawsuit. Class F felony, 10 to 41 months potential. Count 6, obstruction of justice. Her interference with Sheriff Brennan. Count 7, conspiracy to commit vandalism. Hiring the 4 men to destroy my fence. Maximum combined sentence, 18 months in prison, plus fines totaling over $12,000. More realistically, with plea negotiations, she'd see probation, community service, and mandatory restitution. But the felony convictions would stay on her record permanently. The letter informed me I'd be called as a witness for the preliminary hearing in 3 weeks. The district attorney, Sarah Mitchell, wanted to meet beforehand to review evidence. When I arrived at the DA's office, Mitchell was younger than I expected, probably mid-30s, with the sharp focus of someone who'd prosecuted hundreds of cases. She shook my hand firmly. Mr. Merrick, I've reviewed your documentation. It's some of the most thorough evidence compilation I've seen in a harassment case. Walk me through it chronologically. I spent 90 minutes detailing each incident, providing corresponding evidence for every event. Mitchell took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. This is prosecutorial gold, she said. The defendant escalated systematically and you documented every step. She left us no room for reasonable doubt. She paused. Are you interested in pursuing civil damages as well? You have grounds for a substantial lawsuit. I shook my head. I don't want her money. I want consequences that prevent this from happening to someone else. Mitchell smiled slightly. That's why criminal prosecution exists, and that's exactly what we're doing. The preliminary hearing took place on a Thursday morning in a courtroom smelling faintly of varnish and old air. Cordelia entered with her lawyer, a weary man in a suit that didn't quite fit. 2 weeks had aged her more than years. Hair pulled tight, no makeup, eyes down. She never looked my way. The judge, a woman with steel-gray hair, reviewed the charges while Mitchell played the evidence in sequence. Body cam clips, the forged permit, the emails. The story told itself. When the defense spoke, his plea was thin. "Your Honor, my client meant well. She acted out of concern for her community." The judge didn't blink. Concern doesn't erase criminal intent. Forgery, vandalism, intimidation, each stands on its own. Mitchell rose. "Your Honor, the defendant ignored repeated warnings. Her actions were deliberate, escalating week by week. The state will not recommend leniency." The judge tapped her pen once. "Probable cause on all 7 counts. Bail stands. Next appearance in 30 days. The gavel fell like a period at the end of a long sentence. Cordelia sagged in her chair, her lawyer whispering words she didn't seem to hear. At the back of the room, her husband sat motionless, eyes hollow. When he met mine, there was no anger, only a quiet kind of relief. Outside the courthouse, Mitchell caught up with me. Her attorney will reach out about a plea within the week. They can't win this at trial. My offer will be $12,000 in fines, 2 years probation, 200 hours community service, mandatory anger management classes, and a permanent restraining order keeping her 500 meters from your property, plus full restitution for your legal fees." I nodded. "What about the felony charges?" Mitchell said firmly. "Those stay. Forgery and extortion aren't negotiable. She'll be a convicted felon." 3 weeks later, the plea agreement was finalized. Cordelia Hargrove pleaded guilty to all 7 counts. Sentences matched Mitchell's offer exactly. The judge added one requirement. Cordelia had to attend a county-sponsored mediation training course. The courtroom was nearly empty for the sentencing. Just me, my attorney, Mitchell, and 2 people I assumed were Cordelia's family. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, Cordelia stood. "I thought I was protecting something," she said, voice barely audible. "I was wrong. I'm sorry." She didn't look at me when she said it. The judge accepted the plea and dismissed the court. I walked out into afternoon sunshine, feeling something I hadn't felt since arriving at that property months ago. Not victory, not satisfied, just the simple, profound relief of knowing it was over. The kind of peace that comes from standing your ground, following the rules, and watching the system work exactly as it should. 6 months passed. The cabin became a house. Not large, not ostentatious, just solid timber framing with wide windows facing the lake. I designed it myself, working within the natural contours of the land. Solar panels on the southern slope, rainwater collection system feeding a small garden, a dock extending 20 feet into the water where I kept a canoe. The kind of place that felt like it had always been there, part of the landscape rather than imposed upon it. The construction process was peaceful in a way I hadn't expected. No violations, no confrontations, no fake enforcement teams, just permits filed correctly, inspections passed, work completed to code. The way things were supposed to be. On clear mornings, I'd sit on the unfinished deck with coffee and watch the sun rise over the water, mist lifting in slow curtains. The silence was profound, not empty, just free of conflict. The property next door sold in late spring. A young couple from Charlotte, both teachers, looking for a weekend retreat. They introduced themselves on a Saturday afternoon, bringing homemade cookies wrapped in wax paper. The husband was tall and soft-spoken. The wife had an easy smile and asked intelligent questions about the lake's ecology. "We heard there was some trouble with the previous owner," she said carefully. "We just want you to know we're not like that. We believe in being good neighbors." I appreciated the directness. "The fence marks the property line," I said. "It's there for clarity, not hostility. You're welcome to use the lake access anytime." She looked relieved. "We were worried you might think all HOA people are crazy." I smiled. "There is no HOA, just neighbors. And that's fine with me." They stayed for an hour, talking about their plans for the house, their hopes for the area. When they left, I felt something shift. The property wasn't defined by conflict anymore. It was just land again, just home. One evening in June, I saw a familiar vehicle pull up to the house next door. Not Cordelia's SUV, a sedan I recognized as belonging to her husband. He got out slowly, looking older than I remembered. He walked to the fence line and stood there, hands in his pockets, staring at the lake. After a moment, I walked over. We stood on opposite sides of the cedar planks, 2 men separated by a boundary that had cost his wife everything. "Mr. Merrick," he said quietly. I nodded. "How are you doing?" He laughed, but it was hollow. Divorced. She's living with her sister in Raleigh, working retail to pay off the fines. I kept the house, sold it to that young couple. Starting over, I guess. He paused. I came to apologize for not stopping her sooner. I knew she was escalating. I should have intervened. I considered that. Would she have listened? He shook his head. No, she never did. But I should have tried harder. We stood in silence for a moment. Then he said, "She wasn't always like that, you know. When we first married, she was different. Somewhere along the way, she convinced herself that control equaled security, that if she could just manage everything around her, nothing bad would happen." He looked at me. "I'm not excusing what she did. I just wanted you to know it wasn't about you. It was never about you." I nodded slowly. "I know, but it still had to stop." He agreed. It did. And I'm glad someone finally had the courage to stand up to her, even if I couldn't. He extended his hand across the fence. I shook it. "Good luck," I said. "You too," he replied. Then he got in his car and drove away. I never saw him again. The young couple moved in the following month. They planted native flowers along their property line, put up bird feeders, and spent weekends kayaking on the lake. Sometimes I'd hear their laughter drifting across the water. Normal sounds. Peaceful sounds. I finished the house in early autumn. Standing on the completed deck, I looked out over the lake and thought about boundaries. Not just property lines, though those mattered, but the boundaries we draw around acceptable behavior, around respect and law, around what we're willing to tolerate and what we're not. Cordelia had spent years pushing past those boundaries, testing how much she could control, how far people would bend. I hadn't bent, hadn't fought either, just documented, followed procedure, let the system work. And in the end, the boundaries held. Not through force or anger, but through patience and evidence, through knowing where I stood and refusing to be moved from it. That was the real victory. Not her conviction or her consequences, just the simple restoration of order. The fence stood straight and solid, marking the line between her authority and my autonomy, between what she wanted to be true and what actually was. And on my side of that fence, finally there was peace.
Thanks for watching QA Stories. Share this video with someone who loves a good plot twist. And don't forget to subscribe.